What's going on, everyone? My name is Christian and I'm a freelance photographer on the side. If it's your first time joining me today, I appreciate you. Today we're going to go over a motion blur effect on Adobe Photoshop. So if you want your photos to look something like this or like this, then stay tuned. But for now, let's cue some B-roll so we can get into that editing mood. Alright, so let's get started here. So the first thing you're going to do is open up Adobe Photoshop. The next thing you're going to do is select the photo that you want to apply this motion blur effect. So in my case, I'm choosing this photo of this city, Vancouver in particular. For those of you that don't know, I'm from Vancouver, Canada. So I took this photo a few days ago and it was during the sunset. And I wanted to capture the city and the reflections of the buildings in the water. I did a long exposure in this photo, so that's why it has that smooth, silky kind of feel in the water. The photo in itself right now looks pretty decent already, but to add kind of an extra creative effect or feel to this photo, I'll add this motion blur effect. So the first thing I'm going to do is duplicate this photo. And the reason I duplicate my photo is because in case I mess up, I'll have the original photo here and I can redo and rework it accordingly. And then the next thing I'm going to do is pick the quick selection tool. So the area in the photo that I want to apply this motion blur effect is the reflection of the water. So I'm going to use the quick selection tool and I'm going to select the water. So this is the most tedious part. So you only want to select the water and not like the boats here. So I'm just going to clean it up here to get as close as possible to what I want. So if you want to deselect a certain area, for PCs, if you hold down Alt and then click on the photo, it'll deselect the areas that are selected currently. And then by default, if you let go of Alt, it'll be the addition brush, which will select the areas that you want to select. Right, so for the most part, I think this is pretty close to what I want to do. So the next step here is I want to add the motion blur effect. So I'll go to Filter, Blur, and then Motion Blur. And so with the angle, the idea is you want the angle to be in the direction of where you want the blur to go towards. So in this case, I want the blur to go downwards in the photo, and the reason for that is I kind of want this kind of painting type look to my photo, as if like the colors are spilling downwards on the photo. I think it adds a cool effect that way. And then in terms of like the intensity of it or the distance in this case, play around with it, see what you like. You can go really crazy. In this case, like if you do it all the way to the right, you kind of get this look here. I kind of want a little bit more detail and more contrast. So I think about here looks okay. Maybe a little bit more. Nope, a little bit there. So you can kind of see where this photos or how the photo is going to look. So right now at this stage, it does not look clean at all. So what I'm going to do now is duplicate another layer of the original photo, and then I'm going to bring it to the top of the photo. And then now what I'm going to do is create a mask. Alright, so right now this is the original photo, and what I want is the motion blur to be visible in the reflection of the water. So how I'm going to achieve that is click the brush tool, and by default there's a black and white background for the brush. So the way I remember which brush I want to use is I always say black reveals, white conceals. And I learned that from a photographer back in the day when I was trying to learn how to do masks. It's kind of like when you're trying to put a screw into the wall. It's like the whole righty-tighty type thing, if that makes sense. That's such a dumb analogy, but that's how I remember it. So black reveals, white conceals. So in this case, I want the black brush to reveal the photo that is under the photo that's on top, if that makes sense. So like right now, I want the opacity to be 100, the flow to be 100%, and smoothing I like to be at least 46 to 50%. So now I can start basically painting as if like I'm Picasso right now. And the idea is to get the blur just on the edges of like under the boats and under kind of like where the water ends, basically. So just keep doing that until you get it to a point where you think it's pretty clean. I think that's pretty close to what I want. So when choosing a photo for this effect, it doesn't work on every photo. You gotta kind of be mindful. It kind of works on different scenarios. Usually like long exposures with like reflections of, like in this case, buildings, where the reflection of the buildings are pointing downwards. Anything that's kind of vertical will work. I've seen cool photos on Instagram where they do horizontal motion blurs on different kind of colored murals and stuff. It's pretty cool. At this point then I would just flatten the layer and then save and export as a JPEG. Another example of where this might work. So in this case, I have a photo of this person here, which is my fiance actually. We went on a hike a few weeks ago, and they had these long trees in this forest that we were at. So I'll do the same thing. I'll duplicate the layer. I'm gonna do this really quickly just to give another example for you guys. In this case, quick selection tool doesn't work because there's a lot of doesn't work that well because there's a lot of different lines, I guess, and it doesn't really select it very well. So actually it's not working. It's working pretty okay. There you go. So the idea here where I want to apply the motion blur is on the trees. So I know I selected all the trees, and I know that the subject, my fiance in here, is selected, but don't worry about that. I'm gonna fix that later. Again, so I'm gonna add that motion blur. So filter, blur, motion blur. Here, I don't think I want to go too crazy with the blur, because I still want the details of the trees to be seen. Alright, I think that looks pretty okay. So right now, again, it looks pretty crazy. So I'm gonna duplicate my layer again, and then put that one on the top. At this point, I am gonna create another mask, create my brush, or not create my brush, click on my brush, and then I'm gonna do the whole black reveals, white conceals. So for this, I'm just gonna choose parts of the trees to be blurred out to kind of get that effect. So So you can kind of get creative with it. You don't have to highlight or you don't have to blur out all the trees. You can get bits of the bottom of the trees still sharp and only the top blurred out, just so you preserve some details. But actually, yeah, that's fine. I mean, it kind of works. In this case, I probably would have blurred it a little bit more, but it was just an example to give you an idea of how you can apply this effect to different types of photos. So again, this is what it looks like for this photo, and this is what it looks like for kind of this forest photo. Again, I would have probably added more blur, but yeah, so that's pretty much the effect. So there you go. All right, so that pretty much ends my tutorial for today. If it's something you enjoyed, or if there's something you want me to teach or something you want to learn in the future, just leave a comment below. I enjoyed making this video, and it was the first time I've ever kind of made this type of video. I really love the teaching and learning process involved with photography, and it's my way of giving back to the photography community. So yeah. Oh, tag me on your photos. I would really love to see what you guys come up with, and I hope you learn something from this tutorial. Like, share, subscribe, and also catch me on my Instagram. It's kind of where I am most active. I kind of post a variety of things, so if there's something on my feed that you want me to teach you guys, just let me know. Before I go, I just want to say I appreciate you, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace.